Okay, shalom. This is Gene Keener with SYMF Yeshua Messianic Fellowship, and just getting started with our Wednesday evening study in Galatians. We're in chapter 3, second section of chapter 3, and we're just getting started. It's a couple minutes before 6, and I want to just get things moving. And we'll sit back and hang out for a couple minutes and wait for people to come in. Um, That way, people don't get left behind too far. Um, so we'll just hang out here for a few minutes. If you like what you see in the Bible study, be sure to, how do I say it now, like, subscribe, share, and ring the bell for notifications so you get notified whenever a new live chat comes on. So that's basically it. That or one other thing, I'll mention it up front this time. I usually forget. Um, that if you want to support the congregation or the work on this channel, this live stream, you can go on our website, which is simchatyeshua.org, and you can sign up to pay through PayPal, to donate through PayPal, and that the website again is Simchat Yeshua, SIMChatyeshua, all one word, .org. And follow us there. There's a bunch of other stuff hanging out there at the website. And also we have a Facebook page, Simchat Yeshua. So go ahead and check us out there, and you're certainly welcome to come and hang with us. We are currently, because of the lockdown, not having proper regular Shabbat services. We rent a space at a church over in West Covina, and they have basically closed things down to where we don't have the opportunity to go in and use our space. However, we do, it's hard to call it a regular formal meeting, but there's a park right down the street, Cameron Park in West Covina, and we hang out there about 11 o'clock on Sabbath, on Saturdays. And we just basically hang out and talk. We're not doing formal services, and hilariously, the governor has specifically ordered us to not chant or sing, which makes no sense at all. But anyways, make a short story long. We're meeting there, and again, it's terribly informal. We're just hanging out to hang out, and so that's pretty much what we do. Okay, it's a minute or so after 6 o'clock. Let me get over to our. There we go. Okay, shalom, Ruhama. How you doing? Good to see you on. I'm showing that we have a whopping 3 people signed in right now. So if 2 of you haven't yet said hello on the chat, go ahead and type in a hello. And we can, just settle in. It'll be another minute or two before we actually get started. I just want to make sure that anybody who wants to get on has a chance to get on. I was in a panic this afternoon because a lot of stuff going on. We got home late, and I was screaming to put together the to review and update the Bible study, as well as to get the live chat and stuff set up. And at first, it simply did not want to let me sign in. Google did not want to let me sign in to the Gmail account from where I can access the live stream on YouTube. And so I had to go and reset the password. So that's all reset now, but it's all this is running up to not too many minutes before 6 o'clock. So I was a little bit concerned, but thank God it all worked out. And so we're on. And I was thinking, oh, here we go again. Just when we thought we had all the technology straightened out, didn't want to it didn't want to work again, but we got it. It was a good thing that Elisheva was hanging out here, because you took one look and it says, you're not signed in. I said, what? It always signs in automatically. So I had to go do that, and then it didn't want to take the password, the old password, so change it to a new one. And there we go. Hey George, shalom. Good to see you. How's life in beautiful, sunny, warm Idaho? Anything going on? Any news? So the rest of my family will wander up here fairly soon, as soon as they realize I'm actually starting. But it's good to see you, George. Just curious to see if you've gotten anywhere with looking and finding places. I think you guys did it the right way, because you moved up there, and now you can have the time to look around. Because every time we went up there to look, we only had a day or two and had no idea where to start. So it was, a lot of driving and a lot of frustration. So nothing new going on yet, but the kids are loving it. I could imagine, you're hanging out in a great spot for summer. Okay, it's about 5 after 6, so let's get started. If you can give me an idea what kind of delay there is from the time that I'm speaking, the time you're hearing. 6:05 right now, and that may be perfectly okay. Let's see, where am I? Okay. Let's see, verses 6 through 9, I think. We're in Galatians chapter 3, and chapter 3 begins the Paul's actual at-length discussion of what's going on and why he's writing the letter in the first place. So let me see. Get this. That's why. That's what I was looking for. It was on a tab, not a separate item. Okay, we're going to start in Galatians chapter 3, right at verse 1, and then we'll pick up and do our portion through verse 9 when we get there. Okay, so starting off at chapter 3, verse 1. O foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you that you should not obey the truth, before whose eyes Jesus Christ was clearly portrayed among you as crucified? This only I want to learn from you. Did you receive the Spirit by the works of the law, or by the hearing of faith? Are you so foolish? Having begun in the Spirit, are you now being made perfect by the flesh? Have you suffered so many things in vain, if indeed it was in vain? Therefore, he who supplies the Spirit to you and works miracles among you, does he do it by the works of the law or by the hearing of faith? Okay, so there's a lot of stuff said in those first 5 verses. Go pull down last week's study if you want to get the full detail. But just actually, let me read our portion for today, and then I'll come back and do a brief overview. Verse 6, this is where we're starting. Just as Abraham believed in God and it was accounted to him for righteousness, therefore know that only those who are of faith are sons of Abraham. And the scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, preached the gospel to Abraham beforehand, saying, in you all the nations shall be blessed. So then those who are of faith are blessed with believing Abraham. Okay, so that's our segment. It's really just 4 short verses, but there's a lot to talk about. Okay, let me get my thing here. There we are. All right. Okay, so let's dive into this. Abraham, or Avraham, if you want to do the Hebrew, is the archetypical example of one who trusted and was faithful. Shaul, that's the Apostle Paul, picks precisely him because the Judaizers, in all likelihood, put him forward, that is, Avraham, as their hero and example. Here are 3 of their points which Shaul addresses in these verses. Okay, this is Dr. Stern's commentary. Legalistically oriented Jews, and I realize that's a tough phrase, but this is what he wrote this in the 80s, early 80s, and there was stuff going on then that Dr. Stern was working very carefully to not step into, but to try to say things so differently that people wouldn't automatically think that he's buying into the notion that the Now Faith movement was going on really good then, or really strongly, I should say. It wasn't good, but it was really strongly. And then legalism is a very favorite phrase that a lot of people use to try to bash messianic point of view. And so Dr. Stern didn't want to use the word legalism because it mistakes or blurs the distinction between Pharisaism and messianic. And so because as messianics, we do want people to follow God's commands, but we're not legalistic to say that the ends justify the means, or that the work of following the commandments justifies you, as if the work is what justifies you. And so Dr. Stern's straining on this, and you'll see sometimes a little tough terminology trying to explain what's going on. Okay, so the basic premise is you don't have to be a Pharisee to be acceptable to God. As a Gentile, as a Goy, you do not need to become a Pharisee to be acceptable to God. This was the lie. This was the misdirection that was going on in the Galatian region. We have the same thing going on even today amongst Orthodox, who try to tell a messianic, oh, it's you can think what you want to think about this Jesus character, but God will not really fully accept you as genuinely in the family unless you convert to Orthodox. And sadly, a lot of messianics get sucked into this because they so much want to belong, and especially Gentiles, because sadly in the messianic movement there's a certain amount of distance that Jews have against Gentiles, even within the movement, even though Paul argues strenuously, not just here in Galatians, but especially in Romans, how Gentiles have a full and equal portion of life in the synagogue and in the kingdom of God as Gentiles. They don't have to convert to anything. And so you have this strain going on. And I know I've been saying this with every study, but I just want to make sure that we never miss this point. The reason that Paul talks about the law is there's a little confusion, because he uses the word law, nomos, in the Greek text 4 different ways, at least 4 different ways. And in Galatians, he uses it one of 2 ways, and that is the law being God's commandments that we would normally refer to as Torah. And the other way is what he uses the phrase works of the law, is a little more specifically pointed to following the traditions of the Pharisees, such as what's done in the Mishnah, and later developed into other things like Talmud and Shulchan Aruch and all that kind of stuff. So there's a strain there that's going on. Okay, there's a strain going on, and that we want to make sure that we understand every time we see the word law, especially in Galatians, we have to ask ourselves, which version of law is Paul using? And as we go through this, we'll pick this out, and eventually, it gets to be pretty obvious once you get used to looking at it, because there's a couple of points you have to understand. One, Paul could not be an apostle, somebody sent by Messiah himself to represent him, if he misrepresents Messiah in what he's teaching. And so, did Yeshua ever teach anyone to violate the commandments of God? No, no. Um, Yet, people accuse Paul of saying that, but again, that's a false accusation. So Paul never contradicted Torah. So if Paul doesn't contradict Torah, but he gives indications, we'll get into this the verbiage more as we get further into to the letter. How can Paul say that if you follow the law, you're a debtor to it? If you have to keep the whole of it, or else you're not making your word, your promise, uh, proper. What is the context? The context is the Pharisaism, and we'll get into this further as we go. Another thing to understand is, how do we get this focus on circumcision throughout the book of Galatians, throughout the letter to the Galatians, and knowing how the conversion process works. It works like this: you say you join up and become a Jew. Through time and study, you eventually learn enough to where they will finally accept you. And then you go through this process of going through a final a bet din. You stand before the judges, and you convince them that you're sincere and knowledgeable, and you want to make this change to become a Jew. And then if you're accepted to that, then you do a mikveh, a baptism, where you go down a Gentile in the water and you come up a Jew. You're a new creation. Now, of course, as you are a new birth, what does Torah say about a new birth? 8 days later, within 8 days, you're supposed to be circumcised. Okay, Torah says plainly on the 8th day, but tradition says, as far as the conversion, you're to have a circumcision within 8 days. And this is the circumcision that Paul is talking about. The conversion to Pharisaism is the circumcision he's talking about to the Galatians. Not circumcision, which is the biblical commandment that God gave, but rather the tradition of the Pharisees. And this same is true even within Orthodox circles even today. You're not fully complete until you get that circumcision. And so Paul is saying, no, you can't do that, because when you promise to become a Pharisee or an Orthodox, you obligate yourself by your word to do everything they tell you to do. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that's contained in there that has nothing to do with keeping the commandments of God. It's I can't say it's all just man-made traditions. A lot of what's taught as tradition within Rabbinic Judaism, Pharisaic Judaism, are means of how you go about keeping the commandments. Sometimes they're pretty decent, but sometimes they're not. And if you obligate yourself to do all of it, which as Paul argues later on, we'll get to, then you must fulfill your promise. Okay? And do all the stuff that has nothing to do with holiness in walking with God. Okay, so let me get back to our text. 6 through 9. Abraham is the archetypical example of one who trusted and was faithful. Okay, I said that already, didn't we? Okay. Item number 1. Legalistically oriented Jews thought of Abraham, as the archetypical legalist. They even tried to show that he obeyed the oral law, which didn't yet exist. For example, efforts still made to prove that Abraham followed the rabbinic prohibition against serving milk with meat, even though Abraham, displaying lavish hospitality, much like the Bedouins of 4,000 years later, served his 3 guests butter, milk, and a dressed calf, out of Genesis 18:8. Rabbi Hertz's commentary on the Pentateuch explains it thus. Excuse me. The verse may be understood as meaning that the guests were given curd and milk to slake their thirst and refresh them, such as in Judges 4:19, and then followed the proper meal, which consisted of the calf. This procedure would be quite in accordance with the dietary laws of the Oral Torah, which allowed dairy foods to be served before meat, but not with or after it. That's actually not a complete story. It's not a complete explanation, because the whole idea that it's okay to eat dairy first, followed by red meat shortly after, is actually a more recent development, because the scholars were getting a little bit tired of getting pounded for this verse in Genesis, where it appears to have occurred in very quick order. So they made a change in their rules to make it a little more permissible, which is kind of funny, because still, if you want to be glatt kosher, you never go to a restaurant that serves dairy and meat in any way whatsoever. They don't give you the opportunity to have dairy and then meat following immediately. Anyways, number two, item number two, point number two. Some Jews claimed Avraham as exclusively their father and not father to the Gentiles. Okay. Again, it's ignoring that same area in Genesis, where in Breshit, where Avraham is promised to be a light and a benefit to the Gentiles, to the whole world. So Gentiles are included even at the very, very beginning. Okay. And then item three, for these two reasons, Jews thought of Avraham as having merit which provided benefits, even salvation, to his descendants. For an example, see Matthew 3:9, also Romans 11:8-29. Okay. The notes to the separate verses show how Shaul demolishes these counterclaims of the Judaizers. Okay. Now, Matthew 3:9, do not think to say to yourselves, we have Abraham as our father. For I say to you that God is able to raise up children to Abraham from these stones. And that was an insult. These stones, it was a not so polite reference to the Am Haaretz, the uneducated Jews in the land. And they were, so it was an impolite comment that was common amongst the Pharisees, and Yeshua uses it against the Pharisees to say that, these very people that you diss because they're not as holy as you are and as righteous as you are, God can make children of Abraham from those very people, and the implication is, and not you. Okay. Romans 11:28, concerning the gospel, they are enemies for your sake, but concerning the election, they are beloved for the sake of the fathers. For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. It's interesting. And this is one of those arguments that Paul makes to the Romans, basically telling the Gentiles to lighten up and not judge harshly the Jews who are believers, because the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. Meaning that God called Abraham and called Israel to be his people, and to be his tribes, and that is irrevocable. So Gentiles, get your act together, get your understanding together, and realize that God has called Israel to be his people. Whether or not they are truly walking with him, that's a different issue, but they are called to be his people. So understand that. It's irrevocable. Okay. Now let's get to our text. Just as Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. Accounted, in the Greek, logizomai. Again, my Greek is absolutely terrible, and I reserve the right to mispronounce everything. Okay, to reckon, to count, to compute, to calculate, to count over, as a metaphor to pass to one's account, or to impute. Now, King's English likes to use the word impute a lot, and so basically it's an accounting term to mean that it's accounted as being a fact. Okay. And so Abraham believed God, and thus it was accounted to him for righteousness. Okay, the initial beginning of the relationship is then a relationship based on faith, not on actions. Now, okay, it doesn't take you long to figure out that, wait, right there in Genesis, Abraham believed God and was accounted to him for righteousness. What was the first thing God told him to do? Take a circumcision, do circumcision. Okay? So faith was lived out by the practice of obeying God, but the relationship with God was created by the faith, by the believing in God. And so we have to understand that they do belong together. They must belong together. But our relationship begins with trusting what God has said for us to be true, and then acting on that trust, and calling on God to make His sacrifice of Yeshua to count for us. Okay, and Isaiah 53:10 says, that if you call upon that for you, God will make it count for you. Okay, and now what do? Okay, well, now you need to learn to live a holy life before a holy God. So obeying God is a sign of your salvation, but not the cause of your salvation. And understand there's a difference. Okay, we don't obey God in order to get saved, but we do wish to learn to obey God because we are saved. Okay. Again, verse 6, it was the same with Abraham as with Jews and Gentiles today. Any legalistic rule following he might have done availed him nothing. What counted was this: he trusted God and was faithful to him, and that was credited to his account as forensic righteousness. This is Dr. Stern trying to explain things in terminology that made sense to him in the 1980s. Okay. Um, Legalistic rule following, again, this is the Pharisaic rules of that day, and it very much applies to Orthodox rules of today. That your relationship with God is based on a legalism of following rules, not necessarily Torah, not necessarily Scripture, but by following the man-made rules. And the commentary from Dr. Stern is that following that stuff is not going to avail him anything. But rather, he trusted God and was faithful to him, and it was accredited to his account as righteousness. And he throws in the word forensic, and he explains this earlier on in his commentary here in Galatians, that he uses the word forensic to mean it was discovered or found righteous. It was, or go back to imputed, from earlier in the verse. It was imputed to him as righteousness. It's not something that Abraham had earned, but it was given to him and declared for him. Okay. As Shaul makes even more clear at Romans chapter 4, no actions which Abraham did apart from trust ever gave him an iota of righteousness, credit in his account with God. This destroys point 1 in verses 6 through 9. Okay, that you can be declared righteous by God by just being Jewish or by following the dictates of Pharisaism or orthodoxy. Okay. Verse 7. Therefore know that only those who are of faith are sons of Abraham. Ooh, what a cut. Okay. Know then that they that of faith are these. I can't do this. Know then that they that of faith, these are sons of Abraham. Englishman's Greek New Testament. You got to say it with an accent like Yoda for this to make sense, but actually the way he would say it is, these sons of Abraham are. And a lot of times the Greek ends with a verb, and that's every time I'm reading out of this Englishman's Greek New Testament to try to get as close as I can to a word for word. Just you run into a lot of verbs at the end. Okay, sons of Abraham is a Hebraic idiom meaning followers of Abraham, people who belonged to Abraham or were followers. The sons of the prophets was another phrase that used the same idea. They weren't necessarily physical offspring, physical children of the prophets, but rather students of the prophets. Okay, there's an understanding that the one who teaches you is actually your real parent, your real father, your real mother. So when someone takes up studying under a teacher, it was considered that they were the sons of that teacher. Okay, um, so verse 7. This verse takes care of point 2. It is those who live by trusting and being faithful, both Jews and Gentiles, who are really children of Abraham. Even those physically descended from him, that is, Jews, are not truly his children in the sense of being eligible to receive what God promised them if they lack trust. Okay, Romans 9:6. Aspects of this idea are developed further in Romans 2 and 4, as well as later in this letter. Okay. Also, again, out of Matthew 3:9, quoted above. So even Yeshua said, just because you're Jewish doesn't mean you belong to God. It's not an automatic. It's often taught that way. It's culturally understood. You're born a Jew, you live a Jew, you die a Jew, you go to heaven. That's it. Okay. But Yeshua would say, no, you have to have faith. You have to have trust. You have to have the obedience that comes from faith and trust, not from trying to seek to make oneself righteous, but the acts of righteousness follow those who have faith in God. Okay, and I said before, this is a really big cut because a lot of people just strongly believe that just because they're Jewish, they have everything they need and they have no need of anything else. It's a done deal, and that's not the case. When Yeshua said, he can take the very stones and turn them into the sons of Abraham, which if you think about it, he did. Okay, that the people that the Pharisees despised because they weren't righteous like them became the sons of God because they joined the family of God through Messiah Yeshua. Okay, and we know in Acts, the end of Acts 4, actually, there was a good indication of someone who got kosher once they became a believer. Okay, the Mishnah and Talmud, somebody else's commentary, the Mishnah and Talmud debate who is a child of Abraham. One of the points of ritual conversion is that the proselyte can say, my father Abraham, although this is debated. It's an interesting discussion in the Mishnah because the early commentators didn't want to agree that just because you do a conversion that you can say, my father Abraham. They're cautious about letting somebody use that title on themselves. Paul is settling the issue. It is by faith. It is a sure mark of all who believe. Okay, and again, I know I'm repeating this over and over again, but because Shaul has been so mistaught and Galatians has been so mistaught, I feel compelled to just keep saying this over and over again. That it's our trusting what God has done for us in Messiah Yeshua that brings us into the family. And then we are expected to learn how to live a life that's obedient to God. Okay? Salvation precedes instruction. Okay? You go back to Exodus. Okay? God didn't give these commandments to Abraham to Moses and say, once the children of Israel have learned how to live these commandments well enough, I'll come and rescue you out of Egypt. No, they were rescued exactly as they were, with all their flaws and shortcomings and incomplete fidelity to God. God nonetheless rescued them and then gave them God's lifestyle of how to be righteous and holy before a righteous and holy God. Okay, our salvation is exactly the same way. We are saved and then we learn how to be righteous. And our righteousness never makes us saved, but it can be a sign that you are saved. And I don't want to make that an absolute statement because people will obey the commandments just because, they believe they're supposed to without really loving God. It has to be our love for God and our trust in Him to know that what He says counts, and he should be taken seriously, and so we need to follow what he says. Okay, off my soapbox, back onto verse 8. And the scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, preached the gospel to Abraham beforehand, saying, in you all nations shall be blessed. Notice the all nations. Okay, this is the part, and sadly, a lot of people within the Messianic movement, the Jewish people within the Messianic movement, fail to embrace and include Gentiles, and they make up all kinds of excuses and reasons why Gentiles can't truly be full members or completely embraced, or must be second-class citizens. None of that is correct. There's a couple, the two largest Messianic organizations. Our congregation was a member of those 10 years ago. Actually, no, 10 years ago, more like 18 years ago. And we ended up quitting both of them because both of them had a negative view of the participation and involvement of Gentiles within the Messianic community. And we finally said, enough arguing against, a block wall. We'll just, we'll take ourselves and we'll just go away. And even though I had the chance to talk to those guys way back then and explain what the problem was, they would not change their minds. They just felt they had to keep Messianic Judaism a Jewish thing, and they would only allow Gentiles a half membership, or they had to accept the fact that they were second-class citizens within the Messianic community. And we never taught that. We never went for that. And as you can tell, when people come that have never been to our congregation before, we never ask them the 10 questions. Where'd you come from? Who are your parents? Who are your ancestors? Can you prove you're Jewish? If not, do you have to, and the silly thing was 10 years ago or so, there was something going on in the New England area where the Messianic people over there were trying to establish the doctrine that Gentiles must do a conversion to be in the Messianic community. And if everything you ever read in Galatians is saying no, that was screaming in the back of my head when I'm reading someone trying to say, oh yeah, we got to do this. And I said, no, you don't. Okay, you come as you are, and you learn as you are, and you grow into what God has called you to be. That's how it's supposed to work. Okay, verse 8. Okay, and you all nations will be blessed. So all nations. Okay. Point 3, connected with the doctrine of Zechut Avot, the merit of the fathers, Romans 11:28 and 29, is overturned by this verse, wherein Shaul says that God gave a hint, a remez, in Matthew 2:15, in advance of his universalism, which ultimately found expression in the good news of Yeshua, by telling Abraham, in connection with you, Greek en soi, in you, in chapter 2, verses 17 and 18, all the goyim, the Greek means ethne, corresponding to the Hebrew word goyim, Gentiles or nations, will be blessed. Thus, Genesis 12, 1 through 3, the seminal passage announcing the creation of the Jewish people, is seen by the emissary to the Gentiles as also the seminal passage for the creation of the body of Messiah, in which Jews and Gentiles are equal. Okay, see also verse 28 in this theme, and further citation in Romans to flesh out the statement. Okay, wanted to go back to and just quickly look at Matthew 2:15. And was there until the death of Herod, Yeshua was down in Egypt, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, out of Egypt I called my son. Okay, the commentator here, Dr. Stern, sees a remez, a hint of out of Egypt I called my son, in reference to the Gentiles becoming in faith to Messiah. Okay, so he put it that way. And then Galatians 3:9. So then those who are of faith are blessed with believing Abraham. So if you believe in Abraham, if you Abraham the believer, is what I put it that way. Okay, because it's not that we are believing Abraham, although we should, it's that we are, we are with the believer Abraham, who are of faith. Okay, so the Gentiles who come of faith, in faith, trusting that what God has done for us is true and real and accessible. Um, in the Greek New Testament, Englishman's Greek, so that those of faith are being blessed with the believing Abraham. Okay, the believing Abraham makes it a lot more clear, whereas I think this is New King James is the translation in the citation that kind of leaves the out of it with the believing Abraham, and it almost makes it sound like it's Abraham the believer rather than Abraham's believing. I'm getting this all backwards. I'm doing a Biden moment here. So we're blessed with the believing Abraham. Okay, let me just leave it at that. Okay, commentary, verse 9. So the point of verses 6 through 9 stated here is to show that believing Gentiles are already blessed along with Abraham, already his children, because they rely on trusting and being faithful. By trusting and being faithful, they have done as much as Abraham, the father of the Jewish people, did. They have no need to add to their trust and faithfulness an alien culture, no need to become Jews or to observe Jewish rules. However, they, among with Jewish believers, are subject to the real Torah, the Torah as upheld by the Messiah. Okay, this is again one of those central key points in Galatians. Okay, you don't need to do stuff to be part of the family. You are already part of the family. In fact, by the time we get to the end of this chapter, we have the statement, if you are Messiahs, you are Abraham's seed. In other words, we're already family. There's nothing you can do to add to that status. Nothing you can do to improve on that status. So following the man-made rules and take a circumcision to follow that you're promised to do those man-made rules is useless. It does nothing to improve your relationship with God Almighty. Okay? All right. Further commentary. Under no conditions can one require or demand that a goy, a Gentile, submit to Pharisaic or rabbinic authority in order to obtain a promised legal standing with the people of the Sinaitic Israeli Torah. To follow in this path is to pervert the faith of Abraham and to deny the truth of what would later be ratified as the written Torah of Yehovah. Okay, so and this is another commentary, but the idea here, under no conditions can one require or demand that a Gentile submit to Pharisaic or rabbinic, modern Orthodox Torah authority in order to obtain a legal standing, a promised standing with the people of God's covenant. Okay, so this again, and I know I'm repeating this and repeating this and repeating this, but again, you've been mistaught this and mistaught this and mistaught this, and so we need to change our terminology and our mentality. And so I know it's a little bit heavy, but this is the key to understanding the letter to the Galatians, and this is the key to defending yourself against people who say, oh, no, you're not good enough yet. You have to be one of us. Okay? Well, Paul's argument to that is you already have everything you need. Okay? And he cites the fact that the Spirit of God is dwelling within the Gentile believers and miracles are happening around them. So there's absolutely nothing that Pharisaic or modern Orthodox tradition can add to that relationship. It can't give you more miracles or make you more full of the Spirit of God. It just doesn't do it. Okay? It will, however, work to confuse you and run you in the wrong direction. Okay, so that's our bit for today. Let me move over here. Any questions, comments, rebukes? Anything you need to touch on or got a question, even if it's on something that's not part of our study. You know how it goes, and anything and everything. If you want to ask, go ahead. And I'll leave this go for a couple minutes, give you a chance to type in your questions. Um, Shalom, Nancy. Hi. God bless you. Um, so if you have any questions, comments, rebukes, certainly put them down so we can put it here on the live chat. Um, Anything else you want to talk about? I'm going to let this roll for a couple minutes because I've heard that if I cut this off right away, that people lose part of the audio. So I'm going to go a little bit beyond. Uh, if nobody has any questions, we can close down. Um, Again, let me remind you, to how you do this. I keep trying to remember how the YouTubers do it all the time. To like, to share, to subscribe, and to ring the bell so you can get notifications and of when we go live. And also, if you want, you can go to the website simchatyeshua.org. And if you want to look into some of the more of the other stuff, we also have a Facebook page, Simchat Yeshua. And if you want to donate, you can get that. You can do that through the website, through PayPal. You can even send in a check by mail, except that we're having some difficulty with the mail right now, mainly because the post office, where our post office box is located, doesn't exist any longer, and it's not always the same post office to where our mail gets forwarded. So go figure. So if you mail something in, it may not come in to us immediately. All right. Um, so anything else? Oh, spelling is SIMCHATYESHUA, simchatyeshua.org, all one word there. Okay. Any other questions, comments, rebukes? If not, we can go ahead and close it down. Thank you for coming. And if you like what you're hearing, please tell others. The more the merrier. We don't have to worry about social distancing and how many people are on the net at the same time. So we're good. Okay. And I'm going to go quiet for a while and then shut things off. So God bless you. Shalom. And we'll see you next Wednesday, 6 o'clock California time. Shalom. Nothing yet. You want to come by and see what George wrote? Well, thank you, Nancy, for your comment. Appreciate the kindness, and we're here every week, so come on back. All right, shalom. I'm going to close everything off now. God bless you guys.